September 12, 1958. Just before midnight. The music was loud. The room was crowded, and nobody inside Lenox Lounge believed they were about to witness a moment that would echo through Harlem history forever. In a city where danger usually announced itself with sirens or gunfire, this moment arrived quietly, with a man standing behind another man, with a hand shaking, with a trigger being pulled at point-blank range, and with a single sound that changed everything. Click. That sound didn't come from just any gun, and it wasn't aimed at just any man. The target was Bumpy Johnson, the most feared, respected, and talked about figure in Harlem. To some, he was a criminal. To others, he was a protector, a provider, and the only man standing between the neighborhood and the wolves circling it. But what made this moment truly unthinkable wasn't who the gun was pointed at. It was who was holding it. Big Sam. For 5 years, Big Sam had been more than a bodyguard. He was Bumpy Johnson's shadow, his shield, the man who stood closest to him in the most dangerous rooms, the man trusted with his life when everyone else was kept at a distance. Big Sam knew Bumpy's habits, his routines, his blind spots. If anyone in the world could get close enough to kill Bumpy Johnson without raising suspicion, it was him. And on this night, that's exactly what he did. The Italian mob had tried everything to remove Bumpy from Harlem. Threats didn't work. Money didn't work. Violence didn't work. Bumpy didn't rule just with fear. He ruled with loyalty, with influence, with deep roots in the community. He helped people when no one else would. He paid bills, solved problems, and made sure Harlem stayed in Harlem hands. And that made him dangerous in a way bullets couldn't fix. So the 5 families changed tactics. Instead of attacking Bumpy from the outside, they went looking for a way in. They asked one question that changed everything. Who does Bumpy Johnson trust the most? The answer was Big Sam. What they discovered next was even more powerful than greed. It was desperation. A sick child. Hospital bills stacking up. A man who had spent his life protecting others, now watching his own family slowly slip away. The mob didn't need to threaten Sam. They didn't need to force him. They simply showed him a way out, money, safety, a future, all in exchange for one moment, one decision, one pull the trigger. And Sam agreed. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. Because what nobody in that room knew, what the mob didn't expect, and what history books rarely mention, is that Bumpy Johnson was never caught off guard. Weeks before that night, before Sam ever stepped into Lenox Lounge with a gun in his pocket, Bumpy already knew something was wrong. He had eyes everywhere. People nobody noticed. People nobody respected. And those people talked. Bumpy didn't confront Sam. He didn't threaten him. He didn't expose him. Instead, he watched. He waited. He let the plan unfold. Because Bumpy Johnson understood something most powerful men never learn. Sometimes the strongest move is doing nothing at all. By the time the clock hit 11:47 p.m., everything was already in place. The club was packed. Politicians, musicians, hustlers, business owners, all sharing the same space, unaware they were about to become witnesses. Bumpy sat calmly at his usual table, his back turned, relaxed, unbothered. Big Sam moved the crowd like he always did, unnoticed, trusted, invisible in plain sight. His hand closed around the grip of the gun he'd carried for years. The same gun he believed would end Bumpy Johnson's reign and save his own family. The distance closed. 6 feet. 4. 2. Nobody screamed. Nobody ran. The music played on. Sam pulled the trigger. And then came that sound. Click. No explosion. No chaos. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The kind that makes a room hold its breath all at once. In that moment, Big Sam realized something was terribly wrong. And Bumpy Johnson slowly turned around. What happened next didn't involve gunfire. It didn't involve blood. But it shook Harlem harder than any shooting ever could. Because in the second that followed, loyalty was exposed, power was redefined, and the balance between the Italian mob and Harlem shifted forever. And the most terrifying part? Bumpy Johnson wasn't surprised. He'd been counting on this moment all along. Bumpy didn't react the way anyone expected. He didn't jump up. He didn't shout. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply sat there, calm as ever, as if the sound he'd just heard was part of the music. Slowly, deliberately, he turned in his chair and looked at Big Sam, not with anger, not with fear, but with a quiet sadness that cut deeper than any threat ever could. In that look was history, trust, and something breaking that could never be put back together. Big Sam felt his chest tighten. His mind raced, trying to understand what had just happened. The gun was supposed to work. It always worked. He'd checked it countless times over the years. Yet there it was, useless in his hand, heavier now than it had ever felt before. Around them, the room stayed frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. Everyone sensed they were standing on the edge of something bigger than violence. To understand how it came to this moment, you have to understand Harlem in the late 1950s. On the surface, the neighborhood looked alive. Music spilled out of clubs, businesses stayed open late, and people found joy wherever they could. But underneath it all was a quiet war. The Italian mob wanted control of Harlem's numbers racket, a business built on small bets that added up to massive money. And the one man standing in their way was Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy wasn't powerful because he scared people. He was powerful because people trusted him. He helped families stay in their homes. He protected local businesses from harassment. When trouble came from outside, Bumpy made sure it didn't stay long. That kind of influence can't be bought easily, and the mob learned that the hard way. Every move they made against him failed. Every threat came back empty. That's when they realized force wouldn't work. They needed access. They needed someone close enough to reach Bumpy without setting off alarms. Someone who stood beside him every day. Someone like Big Sam. Sam had always been solid. A big man with quiet strength. He didn't talk much, didn't ask for much, and never complained. For years, he put his body between Bumpy and danger without hesitation. But even the strongest men have breaking points. Behind the loyalty and muscle was a father watching his child suffer. Hospital visits, bills he couldn't pay. Nights spent wondering how much time she had left. When the mob approached Sam, they didn't come with threats. They came with solutions. Money, doctors, a way out. They made it sound simple, almost painless. One moment, one action, and everything would be taken care of. Sam told himself it wasn't betrayal. He told himself it was survival. But deep down, he knew the truth. What Sam didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson had already felt the shift. A glance that lingered too long. A silence where there used to be easy talk. Bumpy noticed everything. He always had. And once doubt entered his mind, he didn't ignore it. He started listening more than speaking, watching more than acting, letting people reveal themselves. By the time Big Sam stepped into Lennox Lounge that night, the game was already in motion. The question was no longer whether someone would try to betray Bumpy Johnson. The question was how far that betrayal would go, and what price everyone in that room would end up paying when the truth finally came out. The silence inside Lennox Lounge fell heavier with every passing second. Bumpy Johnson held Big Sam's eyes, not breaking contact, not rushing the moment. Around them, people slowly became aware that this wasn't just a failed hit. This was something deliberate, something planned. The tension didn't come from fear of violence anymore, but from not knowing what Bumpy was about to do next. In Harlem, that uncertainty was often worse than any threat. From the corner of the room, a city councilman watched closely, already thinking about how this night might reach the wrong ears. Near the bar, a jazz musician lowered his horn, sensing that history was being written in silence. Everyone in that room understood one thing clearly. If Bumpy Johnson felt betrayed, the consequences wouldn't stop with Big Sam. They would ripple outward, touching families, businesses, and alliances far beyond Lennox Lounge. Big Sam's thoughts were chaos. His plan had been simple. Quick, clean, walk away and never look back. Instead, he was standing exposed, his loyalty questioned in front of the one man he'd sworn to protect. His hand trembled, not from fear of death, but from shame. He remembered every time Bumpy had trusted him without hesitation, every quiet conversation, every night spent watching each other's backs. Whatever happened next, Sam knew there was no undoing what he'd already done. Across the city, Far from the music and the stares, men from the Italian mob sat comfortably, convinced the job was already finished. They imagined headlines, whispers, power-shifting hands. To them, Big Sam was just another piece on the board, already spent. They didn't yet realize that Harlem played by different rules, or that Bumpy Johnson never allowed anyone else to control the end game. Bumpy finally spoke, his voice low and steady, not raised, not angry. It carried easily through the room. That alone sent a chill through those listening. He didn't accuse. He didn't explain. He simply let the moment stretch, letting Big Sam sit inside his own choices. Bumpy had learned long ago that people reveal more when you give them space to feel the weight of what they've done. Behind Bumpy's calm was calculation. He knew this wasn't just about Sam. This was about a message. The mob was watching, even if they weren't in the room. Harlem was watching. Loyalty, fear, money, and power were all being tested at once. Whatever move Bumpy made next would set the tone for years to come. Strike too hard, and he'd look reckless. Show mercy too easily, and he'd look weak. Somewhere in the crowd, a young hustler whispered to his friend that this was why Bumpy Johnson was different. He didn't react like other bosses. He waited. He thought. He turned moments into lessons. That reputation alone had kept Harlem standing when others fell. Big Sam swallowed hard, finally lowering his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt small, not because of the crowd, not because of the gun, but because he understood now that Bumpy had seen the betrayal coming long before it reached this room. That realization hurt more than any punishment ever could. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars passed. Music spilled into the street. Nobody out there knew that inside Lenox Lounge, the balance between Harlem and the Italian mob was shifting inch by inch. And as Bumpy Johnson sat calmly in his chair, letting the silence speak for him, one truth became impossible to ignore. This night wasn't over. And the most dangerous part hadn't even begun yet. Bumpy finally shifted in his chair, and that small movement felt louder than the music ever had. A few men near the door straightened their backs, instinctively preparing for chaos. Others leaned in, afraid to miss a single word. Big Sam stood frozen, his breathing shallow, the useless weight of the gun still in his hand. Every second stretched longer than the last, like time itself was waiting on Bumpy Johnson's decision. Bumpy glanced around the room, slow and deliberate, meeting faces one by one. These were people who depended on him. Business owners, musicians, local leaders. Some of them had trusted him with secrets, money, even their safety. This wasn't just a personal betrayal anymore. This was a challenge to everything he'd built in Harlem. And Bumpy knew the Italian mob would be listening closely to whatever happened next, even from miles away. Big Sam's mind drifted back to the first day he met Bumpy. He'd been younger then, stronger, hungry for purpose. Bumpy had looked him over once and said, "Stand with me, and you'll never stand alone." Sam had believed that with his whole heart. Now those words echoed like a curse. He wondered if this was the moment Bumpy would finally turn his back on him, the moment loyalty stopped meaning anything. Across the room, whispers started to move like a low current. Some people thought Sam wouldn't leave alive. Others believed Bumpy was too smart to make a move in front of so many witnesses. Everyone had a theory, and that uncertainty fed the tension. In Harlem, rumors traveled faster than facts, and tonight's story was already being written in people's minds. Bumpy leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. His face stayed calm, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He knew this wasn't only about sending a warning to the mob. It was about reminding his own people who he was and how he operated. Violence was easy. Anyone could pull a trigger. Control to patience. Somewhere downtown, men tied to 5 families were already celebrating. They imagined Bumpy's empire collapsing without its center. They didn't know they were celebrating too early. They didn't know that Bumpy Johnson never played defense. He turned threats into leverage and betrayal into opportunity. Big Sam finally let the gun slip from his hand. It hit the floor with a dull sound that made several people flinch. That single noise felt like a confession. Sam's shoulders sagged. The strength drained out of him. For years, he'd been the one others relied on in moments of danger. Now he was a danger, and he didn't know how to live with that. Bumpy noticed everything: the fear, the guilt, the room holding its breath. He understood Sam's weakness better than the mob ever could. That's what made this so painful and so powerful. This wasn't a stranger trying to take his life. This was a man he'd trusted, a man who'd eaten at his table and stood beside him when bullets flew. Outside Lennox Lounge, a patrol car rolled by without slowing down. Inside, no one cared about the law. What mattered here was reputation, power, what this moment would mean tomorrow, next month, next year. Harlem had survived because Bumpy knew when to fight and when to wait. Tonight demanded patience, but patience didn't mean forgiveness. Bumpy stood up slowly. Chairs scraped softly as people adjusted, nerves tightening. Big Sam looked up, eyes wide, bracing for whatever came next. He wanted to speak, to explain, to beg, but the words wouldn't come. Anything he said now would sound like an excuse. Bumpy took one step forward, then another, closing the distance between them. You could feel the tension pressing in from all sides. Every face in the room locked onto the two men. This was the moment people would talk about for decades, even if they didn't yet understand why. Bumpy stopped just short of Sam, close enough that only Sam could hear him if he spoke quietly. That alone sent a message. Whatever happened next didn't need shouting. It didn't need drama. It needed precision. Somewhere deep inside, Sam realized the worst part wasn't the fear of punishment. It was knowing that Bumpy Johnson had allowed this moment to happen. That meant this was only one move in a much bigger game. And Sam, whether he liked it or not, was already trapped in it. The room waited. Harlem waited. And the sound of that single failed trigger pull still echoed in everyone's ears, reminding them that this night was far from over, and the real consequences were just about to begin. Bumpy didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached down and picked up the gun from the floor. The room tensed all over again. A few people instinctively stepped back, expecting the moment everything would finally explode. But Bumpy didn't raise the weapon. He turned it over in his hands, studying it like an object of curiosity, not a tool of violence. That alone unsettled everyone watching. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He pressed the trigger once himself. Click. The sound echoed again, sharper this time, louder in people's minds. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A broken gun. That detail changed everything. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't luck. Someone had planned this outcome. And slowly, the realization began to sink in that the person who planned it might be standing right in front of them. Big Sam's face drained to color. His confusion turned into dread. He remembered checking that gun days earlier, remembered the weight of it in his hand, the familiarity, the idea that it had been swapped without his knowledge sent a chill through him. It meant someone had been inside his world, his home, his routine, and there was only one man who could have done that without raising suspicion. Bumpy looked up, eyes scanning the room again, letting the truth spread without him saying a word. People started connecting the dots. If Bumpy had disabled the gun, then he'd known about the plan long before tonight. If he'd known that, then this moment wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the middle, and whatever came next had already been thought through. In another part of the city, word was already moving. A bartender slipped out the back. A driver made a call from a payphone. By morning, the Italian mob would hear that the hit hadn't just failed. It had been turned inside out, and that terrified them more than losing a man ever could. Bumpy Johnson wasn't reacting anymore. He was controlling the narrative. Big Sam took a shaky step back. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about the mob or the money. He was thinking about his family, about what this deeper game might cost him now. The mob didn't forgive failure, and they definitely didn't forgive embarrassment. If Bumpy let Sam walk out of that room, the danger wouldn't end. It would follow him. Bumpy finally spoke, his voice calm but cutting through the tension. He asked Sam a simple question, one that landed like a punch to the chest. Who else knows? Sam hesitated, and that hesitation said more than words ever could. This wasn't a one-man plan. There were names, places, promises already made, and suddenly the threat felt bigger than one betrayal. The crowd shifted uneasily. This wasn't just about a bodyguard anymore. This was about how deep the mob's reach really went into Harlem, who had been watching, who had been listening, who might already be compromised. Bumpy understood that if this went deeper, he was standing at the edge of something far more dangerous than an assassination attempt. Outside, the night air stayed calm, unaware of the storm building inside Lennox Lounge. Inside, alliances were silently being questioned. Trust, once broken, spread cracks everywhere. Bumpy held the gun at his side, not as a weapon, but as proof. Proof that someone had underestimated him. And that mistake was about to cost more than anyone planned. The stakes had shifted. This was no longer just about surviving one night. It was about whether Harlem could survive what was coming next. Bumpy Johnson finally stood up, and the room froze with him. Chairs scraped softly as people shifted, unsure whether to sit or run. His presence filled the space without effort. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply spoke the truth that had been hanging in the air all night. He told Big Sam that the plan had reached him weeks ago, carried quietly through whispers, favors, and loose mouths. Harlem had ears everywhere, and the mob had forgotten that. Bumpy explained how he let the plan move forward on purpose. He wanted to see how far it went, who would fold, who would stay silent. He replaced the gun himself, not to humiliate Sam, but to force a moment where choices mattered. A moment where loyalty couldn't hide behind fear. The click everyone heard wasn't just a failed trigger. It was a sound of control shifting back into Bumpy's hands. Big Sam broke down then. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a man realizing the game he thought he understood had already passed him by. He admitted the names, the meetings, the promises made by the Italian mob. He said they'd told him Harlem would be safer without Bumpy Johnson. That power would change hands quietly. That nobody would know. As the words left his mouth, everyone understood how badly the mob had misread Harlem. Bumpy listened without interruption. When Sam finished, Bumpy nodded slowly. He didn't punish him. Not there, not in front of witnesses. Instead, he made a different move. He told Sam to walk out alive and take a message back with him. Harlem wasn't for sale. Harlem wouldn't be taken quietly. And anyone who tried again wouldn't get a warning next time. That decision shocked the room more than violence ever could. By sunrise, the message had traveled fast. The Italian mob pulled back, realizing this wasn't a man they could corner or rush. Bumpy Johnson had turned a hit into leverage, fear into hesitation. For a while, the streets stayed calm. Business continued. Clubs stayed open. The balance held. But the real twist came later, far from Lennox Lounge, far from witnesses. Big Sam never reached the mob. He vanished before he could deliver the message. No body, no answers, just rumors. Some said Bumpy had changed his mind. Others said the mob silenced Sam to clean up loose ends. And a few whispered something else entirely. They said Bumpy never intended Sam to leave Harlem at all. Because weeks after that night, Bumpy Johnson quietly reshaped his inner circle. New faces, new rules, stronger loyalty. He'd used betrayal to clear the rot and strengthen his foundation. The attempted hit hadn't weakened him. It had sharpened him. The mob thought they were playing chess. Bumpy had been writing the board. Years later, people would still talk about the sound of that click. How it marked the moment history bent instead of breaking. How one split second changed the future of Harlem's underworld. And how Bumpy Johnson proved that power wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was silent, calculated, and far more dangerous than anyone ever expected. But the biggest mystery remained unanswered. Did Big Sam pull the trigger that night? Or did Bumpy Johnson pull every string long before the gun ever hit the floor? After that night, Harlem slowly returned to its rhythm. The music played again. The club stayed full. The streets looked calm on the surface, but everyone knew something had changed. Bumpy Johnson didn't need to announce his victory. His silence said enough. The Italian mob backed off, not because they were weak, but because they finally understood who they were dealing with. Harlem wasn't just territory. It was Bumpy's home, and he protected it with patience, intelligence, and control. The mystery of Big Sam never fully faded. Some believed he was given a second chance and chose a quiet life far away. Others swore he He paid the price somewhere no one could see. Bumpy never confirmed anything. And that was the point. Power, he believed, didn't need explanations. It needed results. From that day on, loyalty in Harlem meant more than words. It meant actions, timing, and knowing when not to pull the trigger. Bumpy Johnson's legend grew, not because of what he did, but because of what he stopped from happening. One click of a gun that never fired became a warning that echoed for years. It reminded everyone that real strength isn't loud, and real control doesn't rush. In the world of crime history, that moment stood as proof that strategy can be deadlier than force. And maybe that's the real lesson here. In a world driven by fear and power, the man who thinks ahead always wins. Bumpy Johnson didn't just survive an assassination attempt. He turned it into a message that reshaped the balance between Harlem and the mob forever. If the story made you pause, think, or see history differently, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Like this video to support more real crime stories. And comment below, do you think Big Sam ever made it out? Or was this Bumpy's plan from the very start?